SEC is reported this week and confirmed by Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey. They continue to flex their muscles, saying we will have at least 4 entries into the college football playoff. Man, I'm in the midst of a series in which I'm delving through 2014 through 2024 to determine, okay, what would that look like? And in sizing up 1 through 16 in the college football playoff rankings, how much would those mandates change that 1 through 16 ranking? Well, I didn't expect to uncover much of anything because I thought, sure, of course, the Big Ten and the SEC would have at least 4 teams in a 16-team field, but it is a comparison apples to oranges because the conferences have changed so much with the entries from the Pac-12 and Oklahoma and Texas, but still, it's a bit startling how many times they would have needed to lift a team outside the top 16 into that field of 16 to accommodate that number. So again, it's not just we're getting 4 in, we're getting at least 4 in. There would have been times that the Big Ten and the SEC would have been in the 5 or 6 range of that number. So certainly, again, the rich get richer.
No question about it. I mean, I think we all knew in the college football community, not just here at the Voice of College Football, but like anyone covering the sport can put 2 and 2 together. Greg Sankey's not going to be content with, smaller, lesser representation in this money-making machine of the expanded playoffs. So we all knew it would be at least 14 and very probably 16 teams in the new look playoff. So, that's the nature of the business. I think the interesting part of all this, Mark, we know it's going to be 16, I think. Like that seems like a slam dunk at this point. I think the interesting part is how do the SEC and Big Ten go about it? One idea that's been floated, I saw some notes from 247 Sports on this a few weeks ago that they might have these bubble play-in games that I've talked about. That the SEC will have its 3rd place team play its 6th place team, and the 4th place team play the 5th place team as basically play-in games to ensure that it can decide these 3rd and 4th invitees. 1st and 2nd would be a slam dunk, but the 3rd and 4th teams would be decided on the field in play-in games. So would the Big Ten do the same? It'll be interesting to find out. But like that's a natural win. That's a natural, obvious, good thing to do. If you're gonna cram the playoff field with at least 4 teams, have them play a pressure money game to get in. Like one of the stories of the 2024 season, Mark, as you know well, was that expanded conference size. This is a paradox. Expanded conference size means the top teams play each other less, not more, less. Because you'll have Alabama play Mississippi State, you'll have Tennessee play Vanderbilt. You're not going to have all the top teams play each other because you want to shepherd all of your top teams into the playoff, give them as much of a chance to play each other. So you'd have that bubble play-in game as okay, these teams didn't meet during the regular season, so they get to meet with everything on the line. Hopefully that would be something that the SEC and Big Ten will do. Because I told you on this show at the time that Oregon had no business playing in the Big Ten title game. Should have been Penn State, Indiana. Like should have been like the bubble play-in game. Indiana gets its chance. Penn State gets to measure itself against Indiana, and Oregon should not be playing an extra game. Oregon earned the right to have a bye, to have that game off and just prepare for the Rose Bowl. But why are we making the number 1 seed play an extra game? The one team that had an unbeaten record in the regular season play an extra game. So if this expanded playoff, the 16-team playoff that's likely to occur, I don't like the SEC and Big Ten monopolizing the spots, but if it happens through the avenue of bubble play-in games, that's a definite plus for college football.
The way the Big Ten standings stacked up at the conclusion of the regular season this past year, that 3-6-4-5 matchup, so that protects, in this particular situation, Oregon but also Indiana is an 8-1 football team. So there would have had to been a distinction there between Indiana 8-1, Penn State 8-1. So who knows how that would have played out because they didn't play each other. So there would have to be some kind of tiebreaker. So either Indiana or Penn State get protected to a certain extent. Then you've got the other one going down into the depths of the number 6. You're looking at Illinois and Iowa getting involved at 6-3 in the conference. So that also isn't necessarily as clean cut as it could be. The SEC had a stack of 6 5-3 teams this particular season after Texas 7-1, Georgia and Tennessee at 6-2. 6 teams at 5-3. So there will be some issues to work out, and especially considering when you're playing less conference games leading up to those final weekends, because you're leaving those open spots. You're only playing, let's say, 7 conference games to lead into that. So you've got more of an opportunity, more likelihood that there are going to be these crazy ties that you're going to have to kind of work through.
Absolutely. In terms of comparing the Big Ten and the SEC last season, I think it would have worked out more cleanly in the SEC because you had Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, all with a case, some cases stronger than others. But like South Carolina gets in as that 6th team and South Carolina gets its chance. That cutoff would have worked cleanly in the SEC. South Carolina playing a bubble play-in game, probably against Tennessee, I would think. That would have been the only thing to do in that case. And then you'd have Alabama, Ole Miss in the 4-5 game. Alabama, Ole Miss would have made a great play-in game just on its own without having the 3-6-4-5. Just Alabama versus Ole Miss instead of Georgia versus Texas in Atlanta in early December. That game would have gotten great TV ratings. It would have been great theater seeing 2 teams, high profile, play for a spot in the playoff.
Yeah, Georgia beat Tennessee. That would break that 6-2 versus 6-2 tie. So Tennessee would get dropped down and into this 4-team deal. If I'm following you correctly, Matt, you're using the college football playoff rankings to determine those teams that would advance into that 3-6 deal, because otherwise Missouri's there, Texas A&M, LSU are all there at 5-3, along with those other teams that we just mentioned, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama.
I would use conference standings. Remember when we had we had the 3-way Big 12
They
South?
all lined up there with 6 consecutive teams at 5-3.
Yeah. So remember when we had the 3-way Big 12 South tie in 2008,
Sure.
Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. So my long-standing point, going back to then, we also had a 3-way tie in the Big 10. I believe in 2010, it was Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
My long-standing view is conference ties should be broken by conference points of differentiation, not national rankings. You beat this team in your conference, you get that conference tiebreaker to get conference leverage. National rankings, national strength metrics, strength of schedule, completely different discussion. But if it's a conference dispute, conference dynamics should resolve that. So I just want to be on the record with that.
To my point, it gets very convoluted with 6 teams involved where they beat them, but they beat them, and back and forth. And then you've got less games within the conference being played leading up to that situation. So you've got more of a likelihood of those situations cropping up, which also leads us to the non-conference games and the possibility that they become null and void, that they just become these glorified exhibition games. The SEC and the Big Ten are talking about playing more games against each other just to create bigger TV shows that they can make more money, but we've got these guaranteed spots. So I'll take us back to a comment that Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti made when he first got the job. He was just in the door and he makes this statement: it's going to be priority for the Big Ten to have its big brands play each other more often in late October and throughout November. And then in the next statement, he said, but we're also going to guarantee that we get more teams into the playoffs. And I thought, Well, that's contradictory. But then I thought, well, that must be a loaded statement. He must know what he's talking about. And they're going to ensure that even though they're going to weight down their records by playing each other, nope, we're going to make sure, hey, maybe even 8-4 Big Ten teams are going to make the playoff. And now they're talking about, again, I don't know if the college football playoff rankings will determine the top 4 teams in the Big Ten and the SEC, or they're going to go by conference standings. Because if they go by conference standings, then who cares if you lose 2 games outside the conference, because it's about the conference standings. Now, if it's about the rankings, then that's a different deal.
In terms of the strategy that the SEC and Big Ten use, there are going to need to be some guardrails. And I think for me, we need to have, not just explicit criteria. Again, that's why the playoff has been so difficult for a long time, going back to 2014, the first year of the 4-team playoff. There was never that specific, this is the number 1 criterion, this is number 2, this is number 3. There was a debate about that, and so the TCU Baylor uncertainty, one true champion, left the door open for the committee to put in Ohio State. So the criteria need to be explicit. It needs to be an explicit hierarchy, 1, 2, 3, 4, spelled out. But within that, we need to honor various easy to identify things like strength of schedule. To a certain point, like we should punish FCS scheduling. If Alabama wants to play the Citadel again in November, like that should be a black mark. That should be something where you go down a few notches if it's a 50-50 ball, a jump ball comparison with another school from another conference. But that aside, if you are 10-2 instead of 9-3, or if you are 11-1 instead of 9-3, like if there's a 2-win difference or any kind of really clear objective metric, and where we draw the line is going to differ from every person, because that's just college football fandom. Everyone's going to draw the line in a different place, but have a few criteria based on just objective achievements that you have to hit certain guidelines. Here's one very common sense thing, Mark. If the SEC wants at least 4 spots, I mean, the chances of this happening are slim, but let's put it out here. Like if I'm from the Big 12, the ACC, the other conferences, I'll say this. Okay, guys, Big 10, SEC, you get your 4 spots, but there has to be a carve out. If you have only 3 teams that are 9-3 or better, if all the other teams in your league have at least 4 losses, no, you don't get that 4th spot. Like there should be a few basic exceptions. Like if we had the hypothetical that the 4th place team in the SEC was 8-4, that team should not be allowed in. So can we have a few carve-outs? Can we have a few exceptions? Can we draw a few very bright red lines in terms of the governance and regulation of this process? I'm not expecting it, because this is college football, always steps on a rake. But I would like to think that certain things could be inserted in this process to make it clear, make it easy, and make it at least a little bit fair, not mostly fair. We know it's not mostly fair when the SEC and Big Ten are monopolizing things. But let's at least just a few breadcrumbs as a treat.
Not fair at all. I extrapolated some numbers that we found online about the revenue distribution for these conferences. And if you take it throughout the entire contract, the SEC and the Big Ten make $1.4 billion more than the other 2 conferences do. Listen to some of these examples, Matt, of who needs to be stretched to make their way into the playoff going through 2014 to the present day here. In 2014, the Big Ten would have had number 4 Ohio State, number 8 Michigan State in the field, but that's it. They only had 2 out of the top 16. They got to drop down to grab number 18 Wisconsin and number 25 Minnesota to complete the 4 teams for the Big Ten. In 2015, The SEC, only 2 teams. Can you believe that in the top 16 in 2015?
Oh yeah,
It was Bama.
no, that was when Tennessee wasn't very good. That was, that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
It's
Chris
simply
Jones.
Bama number 2 and Ole Miss at number 12. So number 19 Florida and number 20 LSU elevated to the top 16.
McElwain's Florida, like that's when it was Alabama and the 13 dwarfs, basically.
Exactly. 2016, only 2 SEC teams. You got Bama at number 1, and you've got Auburn at number 14. Got to go down to number 20 LSU and number 21 Tennessee to get 2 more teams into the field. And it just continues on and on from there. I won't take everyone through the 11 years, but those are 3 examples right there.
Yep. So if I'm the Big 12 and the ACC, I'll say, hey, like 98% of the time you get what you want. But if you have a bunch of 4-loss teams, hey, we have to draw the line. And we're going to put our feet down, and you have to at least allow for some carve-outs in this process.
Great stuff as always from Matt Zemek. Of course, catch his work at Trojans Wire, and we've got the College Football Show Monday through Friday right here at the Voice of College Football at 4 p.m. Eastern. Matt, it's always good to chop things up with you.
Likewise, Mark.